Welcome back to Conversations with Nick. My guest today is Tristan Green, who needs no introduction. Tristan, welcome to the show.
Welcome to Tristan Green's podcast, Right of Reply. Today I have an esteemed guest, Nicholas Hash. He will not be returning, so savor this podcast. My first question for you, Nick, is one that I stole from you. Would you rather have GPT-5 or the New York Times fact check Donald Trump's next State of the Union address?
Well, if I had to choose between the two, I think I'm still going with the New York Times because of the lines with
Really?
well, it suits my pre-aligned biases, I would say, better than GPT-5. But if I wanted the truly neutral fact check, I feel like I might go with GPT-5.
So do you think most people are not actually looking for a neutral source in day-to-day life for information? They're actually just looking for something to confirm their biases?
Oh, most definitely.
So then, will AI have much of an effect on the average American's views becoming more true, more correct?
I think it should, but it kind of depends on how the AI company in question configures the system prompt. So this is the prompt that tells the AI roughly the rules of thinking that it's allowed to follow. And when I use ChatGPT, I find that it has a pretty neutral system prompt. But we've seen in the past with, say, Grok, that the system prompt can sometimes become what we might call misaligned. In which case, I don't know. I don't know if I think that would be net good for anybody, really.
So in that sense, then is AI? For example, if you ask AI about vaccines, it's going to give you, in my opinion, a very, very good answer compared to
Mm.
a lot of different sources that you could go to alternatively. But the question is, are people going to use that resource well? Like you would think maybe that AI, like that opinions on vaccines will become of a higher quality in the next 20 years because of AI. But maybe you're saying that people don't actually want to use AI for that because they just want views that confirm their biases.
When OpenAI shut down ChatGPT 4.0 to roll out GPT-5, there was a massive backlash.
True.
GPT 4.0 was massively more sycophantic, which means it just obeyed the will of the user in terms of facts, the way it presents facts, more than GPT-5 does. And the backlash was so strong that OpenAI was forced to bring 4.0 back. So I think the public has sort of revealed that what they're looking for is a slavish AI that will follow their opinions in its responses and not be truth-seeking. However, what I think the companies making the AIs and the companies that want to buy AIs for company use are looking for is very different. I think they have an interest in the truth because the truth turns out to be economically viable when
True.
a lack of truth often is not. So, Tristan, are AI forecasts meaningful, or is it something equivalent to speculating about the, say, 2032 or 2036 US election?
I think that the 2032 election has so many unknown variables in it that it is kind of useless to speculate about it. However, AI I find more useful because there are less unknowns. And also I trust the experts in AI more than I trust the whoever you would call the experts, maybe I guess Nate Silver, for predicting the 2032 election. But even someone like Nate Silver would dodge that question because it's just there's
He
nothing
would
you can
probably just
really
say
say.
50% Democrat, 50% Republican, right?
There's nothing you can really say about it. Whereas the people working kind of on the ground in artificial intelligence have somewhat of a good idea, especially in the next year, 2, 3, 4 years. So I would say that it is meaningful.
So, Metaculus, a prediction forecasting service, has its mean prediction of when the first general AI system will be publicly announced at October 2033. Do you think that's overly conservative?
Depends on what depends on how you define AGI.
Right.
I think we're already at AGI.
Really?
Well, the smartest artificial intelligences right now can do economic reasoning or medical reasoning at a PhD level. Now, it's true that their research taste, their ability to find novel conclusions or go down really interesting routes for new ideas is much, much worse than a PhD economist or philosopher or something like that.
Hmm.
But in terms of their reasoning abilities, yeah,
Well, I
it's
think AGI, right, is supposed to pretty much be when can we plug it into a job and have it do the job.
mm. Yeah, I guess what I was saying is that the intelligence is very spiky right now. But as for the jobs is a more interesting question. Yeah. So, what was the rate of task length? It was doubling every 7 months, right? I have it right here.
What is task length for the listeners?
So this is the rate at which an AI has a 50% kind of accuracy or completion rate of a task and how long it takes it to do the task or like the time horizon.
So what kind of task? I don't fully follow.
So it would be like just think of your average kind of white collar job task.
Like gathering information from a spreadsheet.
Yeah, stuff like that. So in 2022 was a minute was the task length that I had like a 50% success rate on. In 2023 it was 4 minutes.
So these task lengths, this is the amount of time it takes the human to do the task.
Yes, yes. In 2024 it was 13 minutes and in 2025 it's about an hour.
So an
However,
AI can currently do what a human could do for an hour.
yeah, although I think it's actually 2, isn't it?
I think I saw that recently. Yeah.
Yeah,
But what's
so
the upshot? Like, what's the idea?
well basically if it gets to 8 then well I mean this I guess you could say we're either cooked or it's really good. But either way a lot of jobs are either getting automated or it'll become heavily complementary because you could be working for full 8-hour work days.
So I type a prompt into, say, ChatGPT, and it will carry out a whole workday's worth of tasks for me.
Mm.
Okay.
You'd expect firms to become much more productive.
Yeah,
But
potentially if it's reliable. I mean, 50% doesn't seem reliable, right? Like, I'm not going to say, tell my AI to go to the bank and withdraw a bunch of money, and it only has a 50% chance of coming back to me with my money.
well, let me ask you a question actually about money. So, what at what point in time would you take a 50-50 bet on AI being able to do your taxes for you? And let's say
Oh,
95% success rate.
I think AI is going to be able to do our taxes by end of next year easily. Yeah.
So, are you very worried about the success rate?
And,
Are you more worried about the task length or are you more worried about the success rate in terms of your predictions for AI?
So the way I see it, the success rate seems to come down to how good the AI is at verifying its work. And I think in
Mhm.
something that is essentially reducible to a semi-complex spreadsheet like taxes, I would be pretty shocked if the AI is not able to reliably verify itself on that
Yeah.
sort of task.
No, it
I think
doesn't
when
seem
this
that
needs to
hard.
start doing things in the real world or reasoning visually, that I think it's in trouble. It's not very good at reasoning visually yet. Um, that's what Arc AGI, one of the best benchmarks of AI progress, seems to show. It's also not particularly adept at operating robots yet. The long term goal is to integrate AI with robots to make autonomous robots that can do things. We're not there
Mhm.
yet. I don't think we're close to being there.
Yeah. I have some splits on different industries in the US and how much yeah, what part of the economy they are
Okay.
or what proportion. So I have 13.3% of the US economy is healthcare slash education. 13% is government related. 10% is food slash accommodations like waiters and stuff. 9% is retail related, including like accounting and stuff.
These are shares of GDP by sector.
This is shares of labor.
Okay.
6.4% is scientific slash technical slash legal. 5% is administrative, and 5% is construction, and then you have like a smattering of little things. So if we were to go by, so for me looking at this,
Mm-hmm.
well, let's start with healthcare slash education. how well do you think that could be automated slash complemented by AI labor?
I think at the highest level with the doctors, it's a very strong complement. There are already reports about the rate doctors are taking up AI to help in diagnostics. On the other hand, when it comes down to the less highly paid parts of the healthcare market, so we're talking personal support workers, RPNs, these are very physical tasks. And so I would be shocked if AI is very helpful or much of a complement, and certainly not a substitute for any of these roles, like anytime soon.
Hmm. Definitely not construction.
I think they'll be some of the last to go. I think construction could go before personal support workers are going to go.
Yeah. Yeah. 5% is administrative. That seems pretty easy. 7.5% is manufacturing. Of course, there's a lot of accounting to do inside of manufacturing. Food slash accommodation, 10%. I don't see much being automated there. 13% is government related. I can see a lot being automated there. This kind of grounds me though a bit because it's easy to say something like, "Oh, 70% of, white collar work is going to be automated by so and so," which I hear tossed around a lot. But when you actually look at the splits, it becomes kind of tough to see really where really what is going to be automated. And I think that it's more going to be more of a complementary role where the real question is how many hours are going to be saved on average in the U.S. economy.
Yeah, so I agree in principle the government could probably be automated to a significant degree.
But again, you would think though, if we want to talk about bottlenecks, that the government would be one of the last to get
Yeah, it's a
automated.
huge bottleneck. The scientific, technical, legal category you talked about is, I would say, probably near the top of the chopping block. That's one of the easiest things to automate, probably, is going to be lawyers and people that work exclusively with text. Of course, you're going to still need lawyers in the courtroom, but already I hear on the back end, in the many, many phases of litigation leading up to the courtroom, AI is super tapped in and in the loop already. OpenAI has like
Mm.
private collaborations with big legal firms, I believe, to create legal centered AIs trained on corpuses of legal texts and case law and whatnot.
Yeah, yeah. I think for me, the main variable really in this whole discussion of automation is continuous learning. Like how well, and it's all about the task length too, is when you hire a human being, right? Say we want to replace Matt as our video editor because we're not happy with him. and, we, and so if you, Matt is really good though, because 6 months in, Matt's going to be able to do all of these things that he couldn't do, quote unquote, out the box because
Hmm.
he's going to adjust our preferences in a way that AI currently can't really do that well.
Yeah.
You're seeing though, and so you might be thinking that I'm getting into this kind of like pessimistic mode where I'm about to say a
Well,
2040 timeline.
you're very optimistic about Matt.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic on that, but maybe I'm not that optimistic about AI. However, you're already I would not say that what you get with AI is just what you get out the box because you can change it very slightly through its memory function. Now, especially with GPT, and this is done through the RAG system. So RAG stands for Retrieval Augmented Generation System, and it's basically the way that an AI can keep both its fundamental kind of concrete knowledge and also be learning on the job. And so humans already do this. It's kind of called like a complementary learn. It's called a complementary learning system. And basically, the main problem is not just for artificial systems, but also for biological systems, is this stability plasticity dilemma, which I found super interesting. And it's basically like, how do you balance retaining existing knowledge with learning new information, plasticity? And for a long time, AIs were having a lot of trouble with this, and it would cause this very dramatic term called catastrophic forgetting, which is when you just abruptly lose a bunch of prior knowledge.
It's been the
And
cause of many re-recordings.
yeah, yeah. And so and so you would think that this is some, if it took evolution like billions of years to solve this dilemma, it would take us a long time, but we already solved it. We already have RAG, which is a complementary learning system. Is it as good as humans? Hell no. That's why I would not hire an AI as a video editor. I would keep Matt. However, given that RAG already exists and the infrastructure is there, you would now be thinking in terms of scale and not inventing. So for me, that tells me that we are much closer to a human level continuous learning than we otherwise would be. And that makes me a lot more optimistic for job automation because at this point, you're not having to invent the wheel. You're just trying to scale what you already have invented. You're just trying to make it so an AI, that graph of increasing task length, again, makes me really optimistic because it has increased so much in the past few years.
But if I take what you're saying correctly, that means essentially the AI race is about building chips, about building computer power so that we can throw more and more hardware at the problem.
Yes. So actually, this brings me to another point where I'm gonna end it with saying that energy is the most important thing. But let me explain, okay? So I don't know why I was doing this, but I was thinking about AI. Well, I was already talking about the complementary learning systems, right? And if you're curious, if the listener's curious about how that works in humans, basically we have the hippocampus, which is kind of the more fragile, like plastic learning center, and the neocortex is like the slower, more rigid one. And the neocortex like holds all the important information, like how to speak English and how to walk and how to read outrageous fortune posts. And then the hippocampus is taking in new information, like for example, GPT will adjust to your preferences slightly, or on your job, you will adjust to your manager's preferences slightly in a way that will make you much more productive in the long term and learn from your mistakes, like something an AI can't do right now, but it can do a little bit. So, sorry. Anyways, thinking about that biologically, right? And then I was thinking, well, what is the story of intelligence biologically?
Hmm.
Like, how has that come about? And I'm already really interested in evolution. So I was looking at it through the lens of this podcast. So basically, here's the rough timeline, right? So prokaryotes, which are single-celled organisms without organelles, arise about 3.5 billion years ago. By the way, Earth is 4.5 billion years old. So that's a billion years just right there. Then eukaryotes arise 2.6 billion years later. So another billion years passes before you even get single-celled organisms that have organelles, which of course, so then you get kind of large, more complex forms, again with more intelligence, in the Ediacaran, which is about 650 million years ago. So 2 billion years have passed now to get multicellular life. And then about 100 million years later, you get the crazy Cambrian explosion, which I'm sure the viewers heard about before, which is, in a sense, a really big intelligence explosion. So just to recap, it took you from 4.5 billion to around 0.5 billion just to get this initial intelligence explosion, right? And then the next thing that happens is that you get kind of a steady incline. So before I wrote this graph out, but the graph basically goes with nothing for the first billion years, then a little bump with the prokaryotes, then a little bump with the eukaryotes, a big bump with the Cambrian explosion, and then a steady increase. You get dinosaurs, and then you get birds, then you get the extinction, and then you get this crazy intelligence explosion with primates, and it just looks insane on a graph. Of course, you're going to say, well, that was like 300,000 years ago. How is that an intelligence explosion? But when you look at it on a geological timescale, it really does look like an intelligence explosion. And so you might say, well, what does that tell us about AI? Well, basically what it tells me is that the initial infrastructure is very hard to get. It's very hard to develop the infrastructure to facilitate intelligence. However, once you develop that infrastructure, it's very easy to scale that intelligence. And what you see with humans is that, well, so you might say, okay, well, how did we get the necessary environment to scale that? And then you have to talk about the savannah and I don't know, the 5 digits, but it's not that important. What matters is that we have a good environment for scaling it, because the problem the reason why intelligence took so long after the Cambrian explosion is because it has huge upfront costs. Your brain is like 20% of your caloric intake, and it's like 2% of your mass. And so we had to get really lucky for evolution to eat that upfront cost. But we live in a beautiful capitalist system where upfront costs don't matter because we have investment. We have, and you can see now that AI companies are getting huge, huge investments to facilitate artificial intelligence. So, me personally, this brings me to my point about energy. I'm not that worried about algorithmic innovation. I'm more worried about energy. And even then, I'm not worried because, again, beautiful capitalist system, they're going to get as much money as they need because it's going to be highly profitable. So the upfront costs don't matter as much as they did evolutionarily. The selection effects are better because it's not random mutation. And the energy problem isn't really a problem because we're not in the savannah and we're not, there's lots of money to go around Silicon Valley. I mean, of course, yes, there's only so many data centers you can build. But personally, for me, the energy is more what I'm thinking about. And that brings me to an optimistic point of view because I don't think scaling is as hard as inventing. And for me personally, I think we've already done the hard part. The last 7 years are like the prokaryotes to eukaryotes billions of years timeline. We've already invented the infrastructure. Now we just need to scale it.
So you don't even think it's a gamble, really, all the money going into AI? You think it's sort of just collecting guaranteed profits?
Well, yeah, I don't. Well, no. Okay,
Like, we're not in a bubble.
Of course, there is. Of course, there is a risk to it, but I have reasonable faith in their risk tolerance, or in their ability to assess risk. These firms, and I think that they're probably on the money.
So just pivoting a little bit, then, what is your read of the governmental reads on what you just said? Like, do you think they agree that there's pretty much guaranteed progress set to happen? And so in Beijing and Washington, they're both sort of planning for a powerful AI future. Is that going to influence China's decision to potentially invade Taiwan in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's an interesting question. I think that on the margin, invading Taiwan would hurt the U.S.'s ability to innovate in AI.
For context, roughly 90% of the supply of chips that power AI, it's coming from Taiwan.
There is that factory in Arizona, though. Is that the 10%? Well, I mean, that shows that we can build chips here. I think the factory's doing pretty well last time I checked, too. I don't check it very often, but...
Well, it's not impossible, but if we're talking about a race, then...
It would hurt them.
Even the 2 or 3 or 4 year setback would be very detrimental.
It would hurt them. I think it would also hurt China, though. I think that's one of the reasons why they haven't done it yet, is that they would probably, if they were to invade Taiwan tomorrow, I would guess that not the vast majority, but a sizable majority of the world would institute some pretty high tariffs on them. I mean, obviously, all of the
Well, we already
NATO
live in a high
countries.
tariff world now.
Yeah. Yeah. And China is pretty dependent on exports. But it would really depend on how unified the world is against this kind of unprovoked invasion. I'm not that confident that a lot of countries would really feel very principled about that.
But you don't think the AI side is going to tip China into an early invasion? You don't think it's big enough in their reasoning for that to happen? You seem to think it's not enough to overcome the constraints.
Well, I don't want to say that because it's marginal, they're just not going to do it. If we're thinking in terms of the cost-benefit analysis, it certainly is a benefit to them invading. So in that sense, it does increase the probability. Like in 100 worlds where there are no chips made in Taiwan, maybe, I don't know, 40 of those worlds, China invades Taiwan. But in our world, like run 100 worlds of our world, I'd maybe do, like 45, 50 of those China invades because it is a pretty sizable benefit to them. It also depends, though. I'm implicitly assuming there that Xi Jinping gives a shit about AI.
Mhm.
Do you think he does, or how much he does?
Well, he's a hard guy to read, right? Because he's not out in the public sphere, at least in Western media, all the time. Um, and though China has sort of supported its AI companies, they have done so way more sluggishly than the US. We'll have another graph in the show notes, but it shows the share of global computing power in 2021 being 41% China, 36% US. In August 2025, just a few months ago, it's now US 69%, China 14%. So that's not to say that China has reduced its computing, but the US's acceleration towards getting the compute they want to power these AI models is just blowing the Chinese out of the water. And I think that's a sign that I think that's a signal that the Trump administration values AI more than China. Because the counterfact or the alternative explanation is that the US is better at building things than China, and that
That
uh,
doesn't seem very likely.
yeah, I'm a little skeptical of that story.
Maybe in 1940. I think for me, my overall takeaway from all of this is that energy and regulations are the main bottleneck, not actual intelligence. It's hard for me to imagine many jobs being automated. However, it is easy for me to imagine many jobs being complemented by AI labor in a way that increases GDP by maybe 1% or even 2% in a couple years.
Are you thinking a level change or a change in the rate of growth?
I'm thinking a change in the rate for sure. Okay, Nick, what do you think about Dario Amade's prediction that we will have by 2026 powerful AGI like systems? Anthropic CEO, by the way.
Yeah, so I like Dario. He is a pretty convincing guy to listen to, but this prediction doesn't seem really on pace to happen.
Mm,
This is a really powerful technology right now in the programming space and in the university, which we'll talk more about in the future. Um, it's less clear how it's transformed, say, managerial work in a white collar form or firm. What do you think?
how it will change managerial work? It's tough because it gets back to the continuous learning. I think that the continuous learning is on track to get very, very good very soon. I mean, if you just follow the rate of change of the graph, which I guess is very amateur to do.
Do you buy like 2026?
Well, actually, let's go back to that graph again. So, a minute in 2023, 4 minutes in 2024. So, if it's already 2 hours by this year and it's doubling every 7 months, then we would expect it by next year to be about 5 hours, and by 2027 to be about 15 hours or so. But by 2027, it'll be able to do a full day's work. Do you agree with that?
I'm not sure I fully understand what they mean by a full day's work. So I understand what a long task is. It's like a bigger and bigger project, but work days don't really work that way.
Hmm.
You go to work for 8 hours, you're not working on the same task for 8 hours. Your workday is pretty varied between, say, meetings, actual project work, keeping up and coordinating with colleagues. Um, and it's a little ambiguous to me how well a benchmark can actually measure how close we are to an AI that can satisfy all those functions because they can't just work in a vacuum. A firm is complicated, it has moving parts. And if
Hmm.
the AI is not working with other people, which it's going to for the first while, it's going to be working with other AIs. And so I'm just open, I guess. I would say I'm open to it maybe taking a way longer time than 2026, than 2030, perhaps.
The problem is that I think we both have really wide probability distributions on this issue because there's so many unknowns.
Well, I
And
think you're more bullish than I am. But if I could sort of close on a note of pessimism about AI timelines,
Not allowed.
there's one last graph I'd love to talk about, which measures the clock bench benchmark. And clock bench takes a bunch of pictures of analog clocks, like watch faces and whatnot, shows them to human test subjects, and the humans score 89% when asked to identify what time the clock is showing. Do you want to guess what the very best AI on Clockbench has ever scored?
So it's just simply asking what the time is?
Yeah, they're showing a picture of a clock and they have to tell the time. Humans get it roughly 90% of the time.
I'm surprised humans are 90%. Maybe that's because I hang out around Gen Z people who don't know how to read a clock. I would say the problem is that they probably haven't been trained on reading clocks. So Nick is covering it right now, so I can't. This is a real honest answer. Well, I have a feeling that it's probably going to be quite low. Just a second, let me turn my reasoning function on. Okay, I'll say, well, if you just randomly asked me on the street and I had to answer like my gut feeling,
Yeah.
I would say like 60%.
60?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, pretty close. I mean, people can update their expectations of AI accordingly, but Gemini 2.5 Pro, a very capable model in some respects, was the highest score among the AIs. And with humanity in first place at 90%, Gemini 2.5 came in at a whopping 13% correct rate. So they can't, I guess they can refactor your entire company's code base, but you show them a photograph of something requiring even extremely basic spatial reasoning, and we are still a long way away.
This is mean
From a
to pick
reliable
on them for
partner.
multimodal stuff, though. Well, it is true that multimodal stuff is important
They don't have feelings. It's
for
okay to be mean.
employment. It's just, yeah, I mean, they haven't, yeah. I just think that will get a lot better in the future, and it just, the rate of progress on multimodal sophistication has just been insane in the last 2 years. Like, look at a picture, like, look at an image or an AI's ability to read an image, let alone create one, just in 2023, like just 2 years ago, or just 1 year ago. I mean, it's incredibly sophisticated.
Oh, yeah, no, it's certainly already been an impactful technology. And in the next episode, we're going to talk through more of the implications of what's happening in the world. But I think this is a natural point to end things off. It's not super clear, even to people super tapped in to what's happening in AI, what the timelines should look like. I mean, it seems that we have very near timelines for certain tasks and for certain roles. And then on other things, we don't really have evidence that they're getting much better, much faster. So, sort of an ambiguous way to wrap things up, I'd say. But
No. Let me cut the ambiguity. All right. Tristan's prediction right now, 60 seconds. Okay, I think given everything I've said, most of AI seems to be more complementary than automation in the next 2-3 years. So I'm expecting really the more important estimator to be hours replaced rather than jobs replaced. And in that sense, you're really looking more at productivity and GDP growth. I expect by 2027, almost all white-collar jobs in America to have some kind of co-pilot, where much of your work is being semi-automated by artificial intelligence. And by 2030, I think that about 50% of all white-collar jobs will be fully automated by AI. And I expect GDP growth to increase upwards of 3%, 2027 plus. And do I have any other final predictions?
I have one final prediction, and I think it's going to be that when we come back at the very end of the season to revisit these predictions, they are going to seem very optimistic, I think, from where we actually end up.
Okay, look.
I
I've
hope
already
I'm wrong.
told you about the continuous learning.
I hope I'm wrong.
We got. All right, we got the continuous learning. We got the multimodal technology. Everything just needs to be scaled now. We don't need to really invent anything new per se. We just need to scale it up. And I don't think that energy or money is going to be lacking, and I think that the evidence supports that. So for me, I'm very optimistic, and I would also add that so many experts in the field, like Anthropic CEO, who are in this technology, who are know everything about
And
it.
fully incentivized to
Yeah, I'm fully
gas it up.
incentivized. All right, look, are in it, are saying this. Now, again, yeah, they're fully incentivized to gas it up, so I don't trust them completely. But when you're adding in all that evidence together, for me, it produces a very optimistic timeline.
All right. I'll let you have the final word. Lead us out.
Goodbye. I don't know what to say. Well, okay, sorry, cut that, Matt. Thank you very much for wait, cut that, Matt. Thank you very much for listening. I'm very happy. Nick is very happy. This is the first podcast of season 12. Make sure to, in the following order of importance, read Outrageous Fortune blogs, follow the Write a Reply Instagram, and if you really want to, maybe follow Kia.
And share the podcast. Tell your
Oh,
friends.
yeah, actually, no. Let's re-rank that to number 2. Share the podcast.